Hi everyone, my name's Dan Draper and welcome to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe and turn on all notifications to keep up to date with the content that I'm going to be putting out, including my podcast. Let's get into the videos. Hi everyone and welcome back to the Dan Draper podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I've got a very special guest on today who I've been wanting to have on for such a long time, and we're going to be talking all things mental health, wellness and just all things positivity really, because she is just such a positive force. So without any further introductions, Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, firstly, thank you so much for having me on. I am Lauren Duffy and I run Rebranding Mental Health. So I am a mental health educator and brain trainer. So I basically teach people how to look after their minds in hopefully a fun way.
Brilliant. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. Honestly, it is such an honor to have you on because I know that we've been chatting for such a long time about various different things, and you've helped me out in a few stages of when I was going through burnout and some of my own mental health struggles as well. So it's really good to have you on the show. And yeah, just how are things? How are you?
Yeah, good. I mean, what a whirlwind. I feel like we became friends during lockdown, didn't we? So we
Yeah.
created this sort of Instagram support for each other, which was really nice to have. But yeah, I'm good. I am definitely seeing the light after what has been a long 12 plus months of extreme uncertainty. So yeah, I'm in a good place now. Thank you.
Oh, good. And like you said, we met over Instagram, and I can't remember who followed who first. I think it was me following you. But then we then started chatting about mental health and what we were able to do with releasing the stigma and things like that. And the content that you're putting out, which we'll come on to later, is phenomenal. Like, and honestly, when I go through my feed and I see the stuff that you put out, it's exactly the stuff that I'm looking for from Instagram. It's all the positive messages, all the positive vibes, but also, like you said earlier, that educational piece on how you can really retrain your brain to flip those negative thoughts into something positive, or just acknowledging also that you can have those negative thoughts as well. So yeah, I'm super excited to chat to you.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm excited for this.
So getting down to it then, where did it all begin for you? Where did your mental health journey begin?
Yeah, that is a good question because I mean, after all my training, it definitely began in childhood. But from what I was aware of, I didn't know what mental health was until I was about 25, and unfortunately, it was quite a shocking event in my life that happened to me personally to realize that mental health was, if it wasn't looked after, very dangerous and life-threatening. So unfortunately, I learned and discovered what mental health was in quite an extreme way when someone really close to me tried to take their own life. And it wasn't until years later that I started to figure out that I also had my own challenges, um, and then had to learn how to, I guess, look after my own mind because I just didn't understand how it worked. And there's a lot of talk now, isn't there, especially about anxiety, depression. Those words are thrown around so much. And I think we have to be quite careful with the labels because I've had diagnoses in the past. I've also been told that I don't have those diagnoses. It depends who I speak to. And when it comes to labels, I think it can be really important to have them to get the right treatment and the right support, but also not to define ourselves by those labels because every single person has mental health.
Mm.
And when I started to realize that I had my own challenges, I genuinely believed that I was the only person in the world
Yeah.
with those challenges. But that is what our mind tells us. It likes to isolate us and make us feel different. So I guess I've gone off the point, which I said that I would do already. But I guess the first time I realized was in a really really, really extreme way, when it was someone who didn't know how to cope, and then that impacted me. And I guess that's when I really started to have to look in the mirror and deal with my own stuff as
Mm.
well.
Yeah,
So yeah.
and I think as something that you said there, and something that's really key, is that when you throw around these terms like anxiety or mental health, mental health for me was the buzzword of 2020, past lockdown and COVID. Like that was the big buzzword. And when you're throwing these words around, and I spoke to someone previously about throwing the word depression around, and it can be so dangerous and so triggering for so many people. Um, and like you, I didn't learn about mental health really until my experiences when I was 26. I had no idea. I never really thought about it after that. And it did take the loss of someone for me to really think about what mental health is and how we go about it. But yeah, it's just, I'm glad. I know we said off air as well that the person in question is still with us, still happy, kind of going through as well. So thankfully for that. But yeah, it's just such a, I think the language that we need to use that needs to change, because I was actually listening to someone the other day on a call, and they were a mental health expert in what they were saying, and the words that they were using were so triggering for so many people. I kind of wrote to them and said, look, you need to kind of change the language around what it is that you're speaking about, because not to be too cotton wool about it, but there are so many people that will be affected by the slightest little thing. By you saying that particular word, that could set off a whole chain reaction of negative thoughts that they would have never thought about before.
Mm. Yeah, and I've definitely found that I've had to, because I am now immersed in the world, the wellness world, the mental health world. I have had to really take bold moves to protect my own mental health, because
Mm,
even on my account, I follow some amazing people, but then that means my feed is just full of that. And if I'm very careful, I want to, in my sessions, in my one-to-one coaching, everything that I'm putting out there, I want to be in the best frame of mind to deliver that.
mm,
But then that means when I go on Instagram, I need to protect myself and make sure that I am putting things out there that are I try to be as positive as possible, but I really understand how serious it is if we don't look after our mental health. But I try to make my content positive, honest, real, and fun,
yeah.
because there's a lot, and I'll talk about that later. Looking after our mental health does not have to be serious,
No.
and sort of approaching it with curiosity. But I have to really manage that and not get swept up just like everyone else. I can go on Instagram sometimes and I'm reading all these posts that are about mental illness, and it's just that's if we're feeding our minds, and that's going to stick. So it's about, and I'd recommend this to other people, it's about sort of controlling what we're being exposed to. So especially at the moment, I don't watch the news. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there are shifts, but I just don't watch the news, because for a few months last year I did, and that really affected my mental health. So it's just taking control. And yeah, social media, there's so much noise about mental health,
Yeah.
and it can be really overwhelming if you're struggling. It can make it worse.
Mm,
um, so it's making sure that you're seeking out the right people for support, following the right accounts, just noticing what makes you feel good, and if it doesn't, you don't need it.
yeah.
Simple as that.
No, and I think that's so true, because for me, and I've said this a couple of times, I had at one point two Instagram accounts. One was a personal, and one was for the podcast, and all the other stuff that I'm doing. And for me, I was following similar accounts, but then when I started to follow more accounts like yourself and other accounts of the mental health space, it just completely changed my social media feed, because previously, and again, there were similar accounts that I was following on both of them, but it just came across as there was more negativity on my personal account for some reason. And then following these accounts, and it's how you choose what's on your social media as well. You can take those accounts out. If there's negativity, or you want to take out some of the negative vibes in your life, block that account, get rid of it, unfollow
Mm.
it, whatever you need to do. And that's such a key part for what we're going through. And like you said about the news, there was a point last year when the pandemic first hit, and it was kind of everyone was gathered around their tellies waiting to see what had happened in the latest briefing and when we were coming out of it. And obviously now we're X amount months down the line, and over a year, and it just, for me, I had to stop watching those briefings, because just to see the amount of people that unfortunately had passed away due to all of this, and how at the time, and not to get too political with it, but how everything was being handled, you kind of just it just wrecked my brain. I just had to come away from it all, and had to come away from social media a couple of times as well, just to get away from it all, because it was just too much. It was really just wrecking my head at the time.
Mm. And we don't realise that even just from going through the last year, even if we have, I mean, we've all been impacted in some way, but it doesn't have to be anything. The last year in itself is big enough to have been affected by it. Even my most, and you can never really say this, but like confident, outgoing friends who I've seen since we're allowed to meet up outside, they don't want to go to social things. They weren't rushing to go to the pub. They've changed they've changed how they are and how they're behaving at the moment as a result of the last year, and that is okay. That is
Yeah,
normal, especially if, like, I'm a bit of an introvert. I do like my alone time. I guess I'm a bit of both, to be honest, but I kind of liked, in a way, having that, oh, I don't have to be out every Friday and Saturday. I don't have
yeah,
to be doing all these social things. And I did start to think, oh gosh, I don't have an excuse now. But it just depends, and we're all completely different. And I think that's why it's so important at the moment to just talk,
yeah,
to just let people know. The first social occasion I went to, I sat around a table and just said, I'm not feeling great at the moment. I don't know what to expect. And they just said, absolutely fine. If you need to leave, just leave. And I ended up actually staying out until midnight. But just to let people know, look, I don't know how I'm going to react to this new situation of being in an environment that is so much busier than, the four walls of my office.
yeah. It's such a steep change, isn't it? And I'm sure that at some point we'll all get back to some sort of normality, and our brains will reconfigure, and it'll be back to where we were. We just need to be a bit more cautious with it. But I'm completely the same. I mean, I said to you off air, I went out for the first time the other night to the pub since basically the pandemic began. And there were people, just like nothing was happening. People were coming over to me trying to, kind of grab and say, "Oh, mate, how are you?" I'm like, "No, no, like you gotta keep
Mm,
this." And that's the problem, is where you've got to have that strength to turn around and say, "Sorry, mate, love being in a position like this where we can have a laugh and all of that, like, but just keep your distance, especially if it's a stranger, someone that you've never met before."
yeah,
So
definitely. Comes down to boundaries, doesn't it?
exactly, yeah. So sorry, Lauren, taking it back, we went on off a massive tangent there.
I told you.
Um, so taking it back, so what would you say then around that time was your lowest point?
Well, to be honest, and I know that this is quite a common thing, but when I went through that first experience, I did, I went off, not off the rails. Off the rails sounds a bit extreme, but I avoided going home to deal with the situation. I went out a lot, was living in London at that time. I ended a really loving, secure, safe relationship, and just kind of spiraled without even knowing it. And over the next few years, um, I made loads of changes. I ended up leaving my career, and I just didn't really know what I was doing, but I would just go, 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 like you do in London. You don't really think about things, do you? You
Mm,
just get on with it, and was really sociable, but didn't have that chance to actually stop at any point and think about what on earth I was doing and what I wanted and how I even was. I'd never checked in with myself. I just kept going. And unfortunately, at about the age of 29, everything just came crashing down. I was in quite a, don't know what the word is, a very, very challenging relationship that definitely wasn't meant to be. But again, I didn't have the self awareness to know that it wasn't right. Um, and that ended really abruptly. So I ended up losing where I lived and eventually had to leave my job and leave London. So that was like everything. everything at once just came crashing down. And I remember feeling it was more the physical symptoms that I started to notice. Like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I felt like I could just be sick the whole time. I just was processing, I think, everything that had happened in one go in quite an extreme way. And I had to go, well, I went to stay with family. I actually decided to book a trip away because I just did not know what I was doing, what was going on. But yeah, I just had to take myself away from that situation because that was definitely the lowest point, because I felt that I'd lost everything and I didn't know who I was at the time.
Yeah.
Um,
And did you find, because obviously we spoke about it previously, when you kind of went traveling and you went on that trip, did you say that it would have maybe not grounded you, but kind of made you think about who you are? And I don't want to say the old cliche of finding yourself, but was that similar experience? Because I know that I had that when I went traveling.
yes, get yourself to Bali, everyone. No, we can't, can we? This is the thing.
Oh
But
God. Bali was
yeah,
absolutely hammering it down with rain when I went, so I've got to go
oh,
back and do it. It was horrendous.
oh no, you do have to go back. Um, yeah, do you know what? Because I've been traveling with friends, I was always, and this is why again it's so important not to label yourself. I was always I labeled myself the quiet one, the shy one, the one who would just let everyone else get on with it, and I'll tag along, but I would never be the leader. Well, you go traveling on your own, especially I ended up doing Australia and everything. You have to be the leader. Like no
Yeah.
one's going to do it for you. There were so many challenges on that trip, but it was the best thing I have ever done in my life. I met so many people who were going through a similar phase, and I think that is what a lot of people do. Some might say it's running away, but I needed those months to just sort of realize who I was, what I liked, what I wanted to do, and put myself first. And I think sometimes you just have to do that. You
Mm.
have to be. And it was selfish. I missed some of my best friends' weddings, and there were so many tears around making that choice. But I knew I had to go and figure my own stuff out and get the headspace that I'd craved for years, and really just deal with everything in my own way. And it definitely did that. I mean, there's still, I work on myself every single day.
Mm.
I have to. It's something that I need to do to be in the right state of mind. But that was the starting point. That was the turning point of realizing that I didn't have to be like everyone else as well. I was became more open minded to people who had different jobs, who weren't working in an office in London. And you tend to follow what your parents do, don't you? And a lot of my friends were getting married and then starting to have children. And at the time, I thought that's what I should be doing. And that trip just made me think, gosh, there is a whole world out there. Do whatever lights you up.
Yeah.
And that was the start. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the answers are in Bali, guys.
All in Bali, all in Bali. So you then came home, and how did you turn it all around? Because this is amazing how you turned it around and into what you're currently doing now.
There was a bit of a process. I got immense support from my family and friends. And when I went away, I just wanted to be removed from everything in my normal life. So I came back and realized that everything I had was fine and amazing. And I appreciated everything and everyone so much more from having that headspace. And I did a little bit of like experimenting. I tried to go back to London. I tried to get a completely different job. Say tried, it definitely got me in the right direction. But it wasn't the same the second time round of doing London. And I ended up, I was in a role in advertising actually, and got into got interested in well-being. I saw how many people were just on the brink and just very close to burnout, working ridiculous hours, heavily drinking. I mean, I was one of them. I joined in with the partying, but I was just very aware. People started opening up about, their experiences with low mood. Some of them were taking medication. A lot of them were having therapy. None of this was talked about openly. These were just sort of one-on-one conversations. And I was thinking there needs to be more support here. So I then decided to set up a wellbeing initiative. And it was one of those things where you're pitching it to MDs who are just, it was a bit like, well, how is this going to benefit the company? But luckily, we got them on board and they started to understand why these things were important. I attended loads of events in London. I brought back all these strategies, ran some sessions, and yeah, they now have, hopefully still have, I think they still have it, this wellbeing initiative. And it changed everything. We started to implement like flexible hours for the people who had kids. And it's just those little things that really helped individuals in the workplace. It wasn't a one size fits all. It was like, right, how can we help those people individually to help them, feel good and help their life in a sort of all-round way rather than just when they're in the office. So that was the start. And then I just decided that was what I loved. The wellness side of things was what I loved. At this point, I was into mindfulness. I'd got into meditation from Bali and had all these little strategies, but I was just I don't even know what the word is, but I lit up whenever I was doing this work. It just felt like that's what I was meant to do. And I went to an event in London one day. I was still in touch with the guy who was speaking, and I was like, right, this is it. I'm off. I need to go and do this. I don't know how, but I'm going to do this. So I did, quit my job and moved home and started to set up Rebranding Mental Health.
It's a bold move, like from what you were saying there, to not only give up your job but move location from somewhere where everybody stereotypically thinks you need to be to grow a corporate career or something like that. And that to be fair, that's the reason why I moved here. But now I've done a completely different path. But it's a bold move, and fair play to you for doing it, because from everything that I've seen with Rebranding Mental Health, it's just going from strength to strength to strength. So we're going to come on to that in a sec. But you mentioned there about when you were chatting to people in the workplace about therapies and stuff like that. And one question I wanted to ask you is, do you think that there's still a stigma around talking about therapy or talking to someone or going to see a therapist?
Oh, I think it's definitely shifted. There's definitely been a change. I was talking to some of my single friends since lockdown, and we were saying that people on dating apps now are way more open. And I did read an article about this, about mental health in general, and having conversations saying if they'd had therapy and things, like it's just almost the norm from these experiences. But I definitely feel that, but I obviously know that I work in that area. I do think there is a change. However, a couple of weeks ago, I had something happened that was linked to something that had gone on in my past, and it absolutely floored me. It absolutely floored me. And I started to have those thoughts, well, I can't tell anyone about this, especially the work that I'm doing now. I can't. And I was like, oh, hang on. No, it's doing it again. Like we're going back to that. That's not how it is. And look at what you promote. So I spoke openly about it on Instagram. And I started with a coach, reached out to my therapist who I think I last spoke to last year, sort of the beginning of the first lockdown, and just said, look, I just need a session to just talk to someone who I am not, close to. And I had one session, and actually that session was just what I needed. I just needed a little offload, and it really helped me. I never hesitate to get this support, because I know it's just like having that person who they don't judge you. You just can, it's like a sounding board. But obviously they are so highly trained, and it's hard to find the perfect one. But yeah, in answer to your question, I think that things have definitely changed. I think people are a lot more open to it. There is a lot of free support now. But I do know the NHS waiting lists are still absolutely ridiculous, especially after the last year. But there is so much other support. There's a lot of apps where you can, I can't even, is it BetterHelp?
Mm.
Um, where you can literally text and you can have just a text conversation, or they can give you, Hub of Hope is another really good app where you can just put in your area and they link you up to services for whatever you're going through. And there is so much out there. There is so much out there because people as well, people need different sort of therapies. Sometimes you just need that person to talk to. The Samaritans, when I was at rock bottom, I had a conversation with them because I was like, I've no idea what's going on. I phoned them and it was just someone to talk to.
Yeah.
So I would say if anyone is not sure how they're feeling, not really understanding what's going on at the moment, the best thing you can do is talk. And we say this, but it is so hard to reach out to someone who you're close to.
Mm.
Even if it's someone in your family, it can be so hard to just let your guard down. So that's why I do think those definitely have a place if you want someone anonymous, just to offload and speak to. And and you'll feel so differently at the end of a call. All it takes is a conversation to turn things around.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is as well, like we were saying, it doesn't necessarily need to be professional help. I mean, you've got services like Samaritans and Shout, which are tech services if you want to take away the pressure, if it's too much that you're physically talking to someone. But you see these things, and it was only really when I started thinking about it, because I'd worked in hospitality for so long, that people like your barman or your barber or something like someone who's external from your life that you'll see on a one-off occasion. And you see these memes go around about the therapist and the counselor and the ear to bend and things like that. And it wasn't until I was thinking, actually, yeah, with all my barbers, I've always spoken to them about it. And luckily my barber now, and shout out to the London barber for this, but he is an ambassador for Better, who's very much a big integral part of the podcast now. And we were talking about mental health while he was cutting my hair, and this was a few weeks ago. And we were talking about how he's been affected, how his partner, things like that, and what he's looking to do in the future, not only with the business but to keep his mental fitness. And it was amazing. It was amazing to just have that
How
conversation.
amazing.
I know, but to have that also with someone who understands it, because I think that at certain points, some people can feel a little uncomfortable if you're going, oh, I feel really bad today, or oh, I need this, or blah, blah, blah. And some people will still have that thing of, oh, they're just upset, or they're just depressed, or they're this, that, and the other. Will kind of just be like a pat on the back, like they're there, mate, rather than actually talking about it.
Mm.
But that's where I think these types of people will come in, and you can have these conversations with them. And it just literally, like you said, it's just the chatting part. And it's exactly what I'm trying to achieve with this, is just getting people chatting and talking on here and in other platforms that I've got as well. And fingers crossed, it's working. We're all releasing the stigma with it.
No, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I do think even overhearing conversations, and when I went to the pub, it sounds weird saying that, and being able to say these things, and some of the people I didn't know very well, and then they would say, oh, do you know what, I had that a few weeks ago, or I was really struggling with panic attacks.
Mm.
And these things wouldn't have happened before, but it sort of takes one person to just say something and then the conversation opens, and so many people experience it. And if people haven't, I know what you mean, but it's finding those people who can relate to you.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
could be someone who, I was going to say next to you in the office, but we're not even in offices, are we? But, it could be someone really, really close to you. And it just takes a little, you don't have to say everything, but just a little comment, and it starts a conversation.
Yeah.
Magic.
So, something that I'm really excited to chat to you about, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. Tell us a bit more about Rebranding Mental Health and the work that you're doing to talk about mental health, mental fitness, and well-being as well.
Yeah, well, as with anything, when you start off, things go in really different directions. So I launched officially April last year, and a lot of work that I did during lockdown was with teachers. because I was working in schools at the time, and obviously there was a huge need for that. The children as well, but I thought it was really important that I delivered sessions for the teachers so that they understood more about mental health. Because what I like to do is I like to educate people as well so that they understand why they need these tools to look after their mental health and the mental health of others. So I've done a lot of work with teachers, and now I'm still doing a bit of that, but I am working with, and I'm really, really excited about this because it's something that has been my vision for a long time, and I never really knew how it would come about. But I'm teaming up with yoga studios and gyms to make sure there are classes that are accessible, just like your fitness class, purely for your mind. So these are like mind reset sessions, and you just come along and we do some practices. I do feed in some neuroscience, so you know why your mind works how it does, and we just start to train your mind. We do it through a bit of formal like brain training practice, so a bit like meditation. But we also do movement, body awareness, loads of different things, just so you understand and you have those tools, and then you can go and use them at home. And this is just like a 45-minute, a 1-hour class that you could come to every week. So that's one thing that I'm working on, and we're doing live classes in June in person. Woo-hoo! In studios.
Finally.
That's going to be so amazing. I honestly can't wait for that. And I'm doing a couple of events so that it's more, because I think community is going to be huge now. People want to be part of something, especially if they've been living on their own. So to come to these events, some of them are a couple of hours, and hopefully do some festivals, wellness festivals, events as well. And I am also, and you heard it here first, launching my first program, which will be online, which is just a 6-week program. And it's basically, I've put everything together, and it's a group sort of coaching program so that you know how to look after your mind, but you also have that accountability, because whenever you're starting something new and bringing in these new habits, it's more of a supportive group, and I coach the group every week. So loads going on. T-shirts T-shirts are they're coming out very, very soon. So yeah, there is loads going on, and it's very exciting. And as you can probably tell by my voice and my face.
Honestly, and I'm buzzing for when the T-shirts come out as well, because I know that I've already put an order in.
First batch were printed last week.
Oh,
Second
really?
batch this week, and then I'm sending them all out, and I'm so excited for that. I'm expecting a dance routine and everything, Dan.
Oh, there's going to be a reel and a TikTok on it, don't you worry. I'm starting to get into them now. I'm getting into them a little bit. I'm a bit late to the party, but
only takes me 10 hours to do one.
It's because we're not as tech savvy as some other people.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, no, as I said, it's amazing work that you're doing there. But one thing also, and you mentioned that you're working with teachers and now working with kids as well. Can you give us any advice or any warning or any signs, that we can look out for, not only in people who are teachers, but also for kids as well? Because kids' mental health now, and I've watched a few documentaries on this as well, is really, really affected. And it's something that I never really thought about, because I thought, as growing up as a kid, in the 90s and all that, I was like, oh yeah, just get like brushed off. And my mum and dad would kind of be like, oh yeah, come on, just get up and get on with it. Whereas now, we've changed as a society. Like you said earlier, we've woken up. So yeah, any advice? Because, for me, it's something that I'm really, really passionate about.
Yeah, definitely. And it is so important. I mean, I'm still working in schools, and it is real. You can notice it. You can notice children who are struggling. And obviously I've got the training, but I would say to anyone listening, especially if you've got kids, it's looking for those changes in behaviour, just anything that seems not their usual self. And this might be that and this goes for adults as well. This is across the board, but anything that is not normal. So if they're being quiet, or they're wanting to spend a lot more time on their own and trying to isolate themselves. If they are glued to social media, I know that a lot of children do have phones from a very young age, and it's just finding those ways to get them off their phone and get them talking if they can. But it can also be, if they're having more outbursts or they're worrying about little things, and just having those. I mean, I do a lot of checking in on my account, like, how are you? And I do this with the children that I work with, and having that, teaching them the vocabulary to understand how they're feeling, and just doing this by modeling it. So talking about how you are, and being like, oh, do you know what? I'm actually quite worried because we've got this, this, and this happening. And it's not forcing it on them, but it's just making it part of the normal conversation. Oh, I'm feeling a bit sad today because of this. Or I'm feeling excited because of this, but just making it, not all negative. Not that we should group them as positive and negative, but not all those emotions that are perceived as being negative. But just using that vocabulary so that they can start to express themselves. But yeah, I would just say look out for those signs if they are quiet and holding themselves back when normally they'd be quite outgoing. That's probably going to be quite common because they've had a lot of time on their own. But hopefully, if they're back at school now, which they should be, they'll have had the chance to get back into some sort of structure. But this is when you might start to notice those signs if they are still being a bit different to how they normally are.
Yeah, and I can only imagine as well, and I don't have kids, but I can only imagine that, you know, like you said, with the adult side of it as well, where where we're reintroducing ourselves into society now and trying to get back to some type of norm. For kids who have either not really experienced that or wouldn't have, the capacity to have remembered what it was like pre-COVID, or for kids that are now older, like secondary schools and things like that. I think we've also got to keep an eye, and again, this is only my personal opinion, but we've got to keep an eye on how we reintroduce, or how they reintroduce themselves into society as well, because that's going to be a huge thing. And like I said, we've seen some of the things like the pictures of people at the pubs and stuff like that, but for adults. But for kids, we need to just keep that extra eye and extra thing, because they haven't got, in my opinion, again, they may not have the comprehension to know exactly how to reintroduce themselves into society. So I think that it's massively, massively valued what you've just said there about, keeping an extra eye, but also, if they are feeling a bit more lonely, just reaching out to them and just trying to do more things with them, like trying to be a bit more active, get them off the iPad, get them off social media, get them off the, whichever it may be, whatever games console it may be, and try and do activities to keep them engaged and then build up social skills again. So, last question then, Lauren. What's next for you and the brand? Because I'm super excited about your journey and where you're going.
Well, as I mentioned, we've got the Mind Reset program that will be starting at the end of June, and then I want to get out there as much as possible in the local area. So I am actually based in Yorkshire now, so a lot of my work will be around here, but I'm going to do some work in Manchester and London as well, and just trying to open up those opportunities where people can learn about their mind. That's my focus. And yeah, running my group program. I'm starting also doing some one-to-one work, because again, some people don't like the group situation. But yeah, just doing as much as I can with making it as accessible as possible to everyone, really. So there is a lot going on. I feel like I've almost been waiting for this point where we can get out there, and I'm like, nothing happened now. Nothing happened. So yeah, it's all very exciting.
Oh, I'm honestly buzzing for you. I can't wait to see what happens next, and I'm obviously going to be keeping up. And hopefully, we'll collab on a project again in the future.
I would love to.
Oh, honestly, it'd be so good, because I want to start getting into more, like you said, more into talking about mental health in terms of like groups and things like that as well. So it's right up my street.
Yeah.
But where is it that we can find you? Where's all your socials, your websites, everything? Where can everybody find you?
So I'm more on Instagram. I'm an Instagram girl. So at Rebranding Mental Health is my handle, but you can also find more information about the work that I do on my website, which is rebrandingmentalhealth.com.
Perfect. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. I've had a blast chatting to you. It's been so fun. And yeah, hopefully when we can, we'll be able to meet up, and we'll all have to go for a drink and do something soon. When fingers crossed,
Definitely.
when restrictions are safe.
I feel like I'm walking around like this at the moment, but yeah, definitely. That would be amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I'll see you soon. Thank you so
See
much.
you soon.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications, and I'll see you in the next video.